With the tow plane? Is it through radio? Is it through visual signals? What kinds of things that can go wrong that can lead to premature termination in tow? Right off the bat, one that I've seen taking off behind the Pawnee. I think Cole was tow pilot that day. Sluggish takeoff. Something's not going right. I don't think we were even high enough to be able to signal a release. Heard something on the radio, but things just did not look right. So we pulled a release. Turned out afterwards that the tow plane just was not putting out enough, producing enough RPMs. What types of malfunctions? Hopefully, if you've done your critical assembly check, you're not going to have any malfunctions, but they do occur. One that I remember, pull the tow release. Guess what I've got in my hand? A tow release. That's a bit of a problem. Fortunately, it was in a two-seat sailplane, and the passenger was able to pull the release for us. Other types of malfunctions: elevator not hooked up properly on a glass ship, control is not responding correctly. If anything feels amiss as you start rolling, that'd be a great time to pull release. Loading of the glider. Again, as we are used to flying our gliders, something may not feel right as you're getting airflow over the plane. That'd be a great time to release while you're still very close to the ground. People in the club have taken off with tail dollars. I have taken off with different ballast than I thought I had loaded. Glider did not feel right. Other things that can go wrong: obstructions. First time I towed behind a tow plane that had a wiffle ball on the tow rope. Started rolling, got off the ground, looked at the airspeed, 0. We're pretty close to 0. Something's wrong there. As you're going along, your alternatives are going to change. You get off the ground. Yes?
Along those same lines, there are Pt.2 covers for the ships, and
right.
We need to use them and make sure they're available, make sure they're on at the end of the day.
If they're not used, beginning of the season, a glider that has not flown, what's going to be in there? Mud. I've seen that happen. As we're moving along, heading out to the north, where are we going to go if we have a problem? Hopefully we're going to identify a problem where we're still low enough to stay on the ground, to release and land back on the runway. We don't have very long to think about that, but heading out to the north, we've got field just on the other side of the campground, a little bit higher. If we are going off into a headwind, we may be able to get up into the upper field. If we've got a tailwind, we've got additional problems. It's probably going to take us across the creek. Why might we have additional problems with the tailwind? Well, wind gradient. We are going 60, 70 knots on tow, and we start climbing up into that wind gradient. Tailwind increases. What happens to our airspeed? It decreases. And that's going to take us further and further away from the field, make it less likely that we're going to be able to make a 180 and get back onto the runway. Going out to the south, things are far more interesting. We've got very few options. We've got a possible upper field on the left. One field that I always keep in mind is the one across 311 on the right. It's not going to be pretty getting in there. There is a fence that runs right along there. So if you want to make a 90-degree turn, set up to go up the hill, make sure you keep that fence in mind, because the last thing you want to do is cross a fence on landing. If you've got departure further on, you've got some fields through here, but they're all fairly small. It'd be very difficult to get down safely into. You do have field a little bit further down. It's, I believe, 50 feet lower or so. That does give us one possibility as we're going out to the south.
Jay, let me ask a question.
Yes?
What about turning around?
Turning around, when you've got enough altitude to do it, it's going to depend on wind. Always depends on the wind and how high you are, whether you've got time to make or altitude to make a turnaround and get back to the field. Very wind dependent. And that's probably one of the shortfalls going out to the north, I think. We operate with the tailwind going to the north. well, that's going to push us further and further away from the field before we have enough altitude. We may never get enough altitude to make a 180 safely back on the departure. Got to plan ahead, think about what that wind is going to do, what is the density altitude going to do to takeoff performance. Are you flying a single seat, or are you flying a heavy two-seater? All of those are going to change the equation, and you need to think about that before you start rolling, before you even hook up to the tow plane, because as soon as you are hooked up to that tow plane, you're potentially ready to launch. Now, emergency signals on tow. This is one that has caused more than one pilot to release at very low altitude, dive breaks out, unable to make it back to the field. If the tow plane is climbing out, if it's got a positive rate of climb, tow plane probably should not be indicating this for dive breaks out unless conditions are really deteriorating, because the pilot may not realize what's wrong in the glider, and it may send the pilot into the ground. It's happened I think it happens every year or two. So SSA would like to discourage use of this at low altitude. If you can get the glider up and back over the field, then signal this. Pilot will either recover or release over the field. It's better to do. Better than this?
Radio.
Communicate. Radio. Tell the glider that the dive brakes are out or something's wrong. On the other hand, we see this. Release. But keep in mind where you are, what is happening. Are things progressing as they should? If something doesn't look right, get off that tow rope. Additional signals. We've got the 2 emergency signals. Most of the rest of these, you got the tow plane, left or right.
And getting back to communication, sometimes the tow pilot is feeling a tug of left to the right. That may be the instructor may be telling the student, I want you to see if you can hold it out there. It may be just sloppy tow practice, or they may legitimately be trying to tell the tow plane to turn. So communication with the tow pilot before takeoff is always good.
Good.
I'd like to amplify something that you pointed out in a couple of ways. The problems of sluggish performance, poor climb, something doesn't feel right about my glider, maybe there's a different attitude and you're wondering, the tow plane may start making some kind of signals, you're not sure. Always assume that the problem is you, and always look for it immediately. What I just described, all those situations, my dive brakes are over. So the first time you sense something's not right, make sure it's not you, because it probably is. And most times, if you close the dive brakes, you'll proceed without difficulty.
I'll always take off with my hand on the dive brakes to ensure that they are closed, and that I know where they are. One thing that we do spend a lot of time practicing that I didn't mention, rope break. How often, anybody in here experienced a rope break in tow, during tow? 1 or 2, a couple of people? They don't happen that often on tow. Frequently, they're most likely to happen on that initial acceleration, as most of the load is on that rope. We do train for that. It's a great training tool. Not nearly as common